Do you ever, when you're training people, you obviously fight from like a bladed karate style stance majority of the time. Mm-hmm. But when you're teaching people, if they have like a more square stance, like, do you try to coach them out of that, or do you?
No, so if they're a student, they start from day one, they kind of naturally kind of go into.
They do what y'all are doing.
We're doing.
Yeah.
But you have fighters that come from different schools, right? We have a lot of guys come from AKA, ATT, just all over. I don't try to change them. Right. I don't try to change them at all. I give them things that they could use for their arsenal if they choose to.
Right, like kind of a bag of tricks, right. Sort of, you could do this.
Right.
Right.
And we kind of hint to play around just to widen your stance just a little bit. Don't do this all the time, mm-hmm. right? Don't stand here all the time.
You mean it's not binary? You mean it's not like you either do it this way or that way?
Well, there's a saying, you probably heard this saying before, too much of something can get you hurt.
Yeah.
Right? Too much of the same thing can get you hurt, for instance.
Yeah, you can have too much of anything.
Right. And the way you stand,
you can drink too much water,
and it will kill you.
And it'll kill you.
Yeah.
You've almost done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Same. Magnesium. I have like magnesium poisoning. Basically.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
But the square stance versus the bladed stance. You know, what is the difference? Steve and I are going to talk about the pros and the cons, like the disadvantages and advantages of each. And I know what you're thinking. They're thinking like, oh, duh, I already know this. Like bladed stance, more mobility. Square stance, you like to get hit in the body a lot. I don't know, but we're gonna go a little deeper than that, because after all, you are learning about this from one of the world's greatest martial artists, and also Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
Let's go.
If you're not already subscribed to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's channel, you need to do that. I always go kind of gush over his channel because he's I think the first sort of like mainstream martial arts personality to go into YouTube and do it as a white belt. Like you came to YouTube as a white belt and like, I want to be a YouTuber. So when you talk about YouTube, it's from the perspective of a YouTuber, not, hey, I'm a UFC fighter, so that's why you should subscribe.
Yes,
like
sir.
He didn't do that. So real quick, bladed stance.
Yes.
Show us the bladed stance.
So
versus square stance. Yeah.
Mine's a little different. So, we teach back foot slightly over, a little bit wider stance. Majority of the time, almost like I'm surfing.
You're even more bladed than bladed.
Right.
You're like too karate for karate.
Yeah. And there's kind of a reason for that, I guess. Here, I'm more committed to, I guess my hands. Here, I'm kind of 50-50 stance, so right. I can evade just as fast as I can come forward.
Yeah, the same, you can move that way just as well as you can move this way.
Right, and when I'm if I move this foot over and I get my body leaning forward, it's a little bit more difficult. I kind of have to turn in order to do so. When I'm bladed, it's just, I'm already here.
Yeah, but you'll probably, as we go through this, and if you've watched any of Stephen's fight, you'll probably see it's not ever that his foot's in exactly the same position every time. He modifies it based on what's happening, which is going to be kind of the theme here. Just like people say, oh, I stand too square and I march straight forward. People think of squares like this.
Yes.
But I think this is all like non-binary. Like you could, this is bladed. This is bladed.
Yep.
What is this? Is this more square?
That's more square. Yeah, I guess you get to a certain point, it becomes a little more square for sure.
I kind of think a lot of it has to do with the back foot. Like how forward it's pointed, because you could be standing like this and it's like I don't know what this is
and no idea what
like maybe I'm trying to get
idea what
is it bladed or is it square? Advantages, obviously he can move forward and backwards bladed. People would say that the square stance is not as mobile. I would argue that from square stance, especially if I go a little wider, I can move this way and that way a little better.
And I do that. The guys that I've seen that I've actually had the privilege to spar with. For instance, one of the best strikers who ever on the planet who ever lived, Anderson Silva. World champion, Muay Thai guy. He stands square, but he will also get into that karate stance. When I sparred him, he started out as a Muay Thai stance, and we played a little bit, and the next thing I know, he goes from here, and I had no idea he could do this. He gets here and starts moving like a karate guy. And I'm like, what? What do I do now? You know what I'm saying? So I've kind of learned from that a little bit, and even though I square my stance up some, and it may not look like the way you square your stance
yeah, it's
up.
compared to someone who's real square.
Right.
Yeah, square. But that brings me a good point. I think if you're trying to figure out like which you are, well, ultimately, let's spoil alert, we're going to say that you should know how to do both.
Yes.
You should have some 100%. Tools from both. Obviously, you're going to lean one way more than the other.
Yes.
I want to hear your thoughts on this. My coach always told me, like, if I'm fighting with a dude and he's like all about that karate life, that's probably the time that I should square up and try to close the distance and not try to go tit for tat with him.
Yes, 100%.
Conversely, if the guy is like rock solid and trying to rock 'em, sock 'em robots every time you come in, you kind of need to hit and run.
It's crazy how your opponent determines how you fight, right?
Yeah.
It's the little things that determine. It's not just black and white. I can just do this all the time.
Yeah, it's not A or B. It's not black or white.
Right.
It's not a binary thing.
It's not. You have to be so versatile and so adaptive to, your opponent and how they fight, which will change your game up or change your stance. For instance, the bladed stance. What's the closest thing to you right now? 100%.
Yeah.
If I stay here all the time, that leg's gonna get eaten up. If I don't have some things that I can do, it's hard for me to check a kick when I'm bladed.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, right? Anytime that we go to fights, people know that we have a bladed stance. A lot of guys, maybe not as quite as the same as mine, but the first thing they do is lay leg.
Yeah.
They want
that thing.
Right. So here, I either gotta move it back, but it's hard to turn and check that.
Yeah.
So if I'm fighting a leg kicker, I will square my stance up a little bit.
Yeah, especially if he's a fast leg kicker.
Exactly.
Like, if he's winding way up and giving you plenty of time to move, that's cool. But if he's like one of these
Boom.
fast, boom.
I kind of square my stance so that way that's here, right?
Yeah.
Or, for instance, when I fought Vicente, I got hit with 3 low calf kicks. I was limping for over a week from those. But all I did was switch. Boom.
Now he's running into those.
Right. I just eat him. But let's say you're not a guy who switches stances, right?
You're not bistantial.
You're not bistantial. I love your words today. You're not bistantial. The squaring of the stance will help with defending those leg kicks a little bit easier.
Of course, now they're going to say, now your body's open if you're squared up to me. And yeah, but what we're kind of also getting at is what I can make you, just like what you do dictates how I stand. Yes. How I stand can dictate what you do.
Yes.
If I stand like this, I'm sort of inviting, like, go ahead and kick that
go
thing.
ahead and go for it.
Right? If I stand like this, I'm kind of saying, like, go ahead and go for that.
Ahead.
And you know that, and you can have defense in place.
100%.
I think one of the things that people don't talk about when they talk about the square stance is the time and distance and power of your rear hand.
Yeah.
So, like, from here, you can throw a very hard,
powerful
rear hand,
but it takes longer to get
but it takes longer to get there. When you square up, your power is more distributed evenly. You can even turn your lead hand into more of a straight than a jab.
You got more body rotation with both, I believe. Right?
Yeah, or it takes some of this juice and adds it to this one and kind of splits it more evenly.
I agree.
The trade-off being neither one's as powerful as that big shot.
Yep.
And they take, believe it or not, like this wears my legs out, right? Obviously, because I'm using a lot of legs to move around. This one wears my arms out because you end up using a little more arm to punch.
It's funny you said that because we just recently saw a guy who fights that way versus a guy who's a little more bladed. So, for instance, Max Holloway.
Right.
He's not a guy that knocks a lot of guys out, right? He beats people with volume because he stands more square and he can throw a lot more. Nate Diaz is the same way. It's just constant pop, 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 pop. They don't have a ton, not saying you can't hurt anybody, because I know a lot of guys who fight this way and will put you to sleep, but it's kind of geared towards guys who, throw a lot of that upper body strikes, right? Pop, 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 just beat you with just pure volume. But depending on how your partner is, for instance, he fought Volkanovski. Volkanovski was very good at that in and out movement. He had a little bit more power on that right hand because he was bladed and was landing it more. And I think that kind of wore down Max.
Yeah.
But I've seen it vice versa. Guys with that square stance, right? And just come forward. Maybe they were a little bigger and just beat dudes up with just sheer volume from that square stance. So yeah, I agree with you there. If you don't have the stamina for this, you will tire out.
Yeah, your arms get tired. People say you don't punch with your arms. Yes, you do. What else are you going to punch with?
Right.
Your hands are on the ends of your arms. Yeah. I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
I'm using all technique. No muscle. Just the power, just the hips.
I mean, you can't tell me this. You're not using your arm.
That is definitely your arm.
That's your arm. So when I'm bladed, some of us, because I'm in a really bladed stance, so everybody knows I can go forward and back fairly easy, right? With pretty fast, but the side-to-side movements
They'll try
not
to cut
there.
you. And hey, newsflash, guys are going to try to cut Wonder Boy off. Like, I don't know if you knew, that's the secret.
When I get close to the cage, though, I do go more square because I have to move. I have to use that side-to-side movement to stay off the cage. But out in the open, the way I get from here to there is I use my strikes to do so. Dominic Cruz, right? How does he go from this way to that way, even though he's here? He uses his strikes.
That was my Dominic Cruz impression.
Yeah, that was actually pretty good. I was like, man, this guy's got it down. But his head movement and the way he leans helps him get to point A to point B.
Right.
So one of the things that actually helped me go from side to side is I use my strikes and my head movement, getting myself in like a leaning position to help get offline. So for instance, if you were coming at me, I would throw a jab, right? Number one, I've got two things happening right now. I've got a distraction for you. If I hurt you, great. If not, it's my distraction. Just eat it. The power of the beard.
Yeah.
And two, I've got my head offline, so that way I'm not threatened by that jab. So the third thing, now I'm leaning this direction, it enables me, puts me in a position to go that way. So now I can step off to the side. So it's more like you know what I'm saying?
You've pitched yourself, and it's not, so a lot of times with balance, people are like, oh, you're off balance. It's like, it's not an error if you did it on purpose.
Right.
If you chose to do that, knowing that that's the way you wanted to go.
Exactly.
Conversely, so the square stance, the limits of that is I can't move this way and that way as good, so people think.
Right.
I think it comes from people associate the square stance with Muay Thai.
100%.
You know, so they think my leg's narrow.
Yeah.
But you can stand square with your legs. I don't know if you've ever seen, you might not be familiar with a stance like this. I'm sure this isn't really
I've never seen this before in my life.
Where your hips are square and your shoulders are square, but your legs are a little split apart, almost like a false lead.
Right.
You can move forward and backwards.
Fastest people in the world are what? World-class sprinters. You will never see a sprinter not be in this position, which is the position basically you're in.
Yeah.
How can you not go that way fast? And that's like you said, with guys in Muay Thai, the back heel's down.
Yeah.
And they're here.
Their weight's on it.
Right. And they can't, they got a lot of this going on, but they can't cover that gap. But I can still be in a square stance, get that back heel up. Now I'm ready to go.
That's a super fast tool. You only have to, if you're creating that tension, some of you guys might be familiar with a drop step, and I lift this foot, you're gone. You just have to push a little bit, boom.
And the other way around, you lift this foot.
Yeah. So you can do things to kind of overcome the weaknesses of each position.
Yes.
It goes deeper than this stance is for this, that stance is for that.
But you got to put in the work to be able to do so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys who like the square. I know, like the square stance because it's
hands down, way less energy expenditure if you stand like this. And your defense is mostly, you've got good defense all on the outside. It can be a trap you get caught in.
I agree.
Of being lazy like this. I'm guilty of it myself all the time.
Oh yeah.
Conversely, I would counterpoint you guys that are all about this.
Very tiring.
This is tiring, but maybe it's because you don't like getting hit a whole lot.
Right.
Right? And so sometimes it's time to bite down on that mouth guard.
You got to be able to do both.
Mm-hmm. You got to be able to go both ways. You got to be stance fluid.
Right.
Stance fluid.
Stance fluid. I've never heard these words before. Are you just making these up right now?
No, this is part of my thing.
Okay.
This is a thing I do.